So, about a year ago, I did a rather scuffed series involving soap paste and the things you could turn it into. And so I made a soap paste, and then I think ultimately, with all of it, we ended up turning it into a whipped shaver, a face wash, a liquid lotion, and a whipped sugar soap scrub. And I say that I released it scuffed because it kind of was. I made the soap paste. While all the information that I gave was good and the recipes were sound, I spaced them apart so much that the casual viewer wasn't going to be able to actually follow along with all of this. And for a sudser that just found the channel on a random Tuesday, anytime between when that series was dropping over the course of, I think, like 4 or 5 weeks and today, it makes it kind of hard to follow and go back and sleuth and find the recipes. And I'm talking about that because a few weeks ago, the owner of Swift Creek Soapery made a post on Saponification Nation about my whipped sugar soap scrub and the recipe. And in reading all of that, while I really do believe that it would have been better for her, for me, for everyone to have reached out to me directly or just, made a comment on the video itself, because just a casual look at my comment section will show you that I'm incredibly involved and engaged in that thing for sure. I do think that it still gave me an opportunity to go back and look at this and realize that maybe she's not the only one out there with some questions or in need of some assistance with some troubleshooting. And so that's what we are doing with this playlist. And I'm super excited to talk to you about it because lots of cool recipes, lots of cool stuff's going to go on with this one. I'm super stoked, and we can make it all not scuffed and in one place. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait, but I have to send you the thing because it's my thing. So hello, I am Mrs. Soap and Clay. Let's make stuff. How's it going, Sudsers? Welcome back to the channel. You are at Soap and Clay, where we make all the soapy things. And you are here for day 347 of 365 days of soap. And today, as I said, we are starting another playlist. And that playlist is going to focus specifically on soap bases that you can make and store and turn into other things. But for those other things that I'm going to turn these recipes into, we are going to focus specifically on whipped sugar soap scrubs. Because when Rachel posted the thing, just first and foremost, just looking at that picture, any person who's like tried to make a whipped cream frosting in a 90-degree kitchen could already tell that she was dealing with some very serious heat concerns. It was whipped too hot and probably also whipped too long. And within the comments of that post, I saw that there were people that were experiencing both ends of the spectrum with this. Either it was too runny or it was too thick or whatever. And that got me thinking, because while I did state in that video that you should start your whip when the actual base is cooled down and not over whip it, I didn't actually tell you why. And that's not good. And so I thought that we could do this with this playlist and start with the original recipe and start the troubleshooting with that and talk about some of the interesting information that Rachel was given, which probably confused her more. So again, if you're a new soaper, even if you're an experienced soaper, just come to me personally or the comment section, because you can get confused on those sites. They're a lot. But yeah, lots of weird information within the comment section of that. So while we can address all of those, it gives me an opportunity to help you out with this specific recipe. Again, talk about why I selected the oils that I did for the paste, how you can modify that paste for different needs, but also within this playlist, do a number of other recipes so you can make a soap base that can be turned into a whipped sugar soap scrub or a multitude of other things. So that's what we'll be doing. And today's video is going to be focused on the original recipe, the soap paste that I had given. So we will talk about that recipe. We will talk about the whys behind why I selected the oils and the butters that I did for that, as well as what to look for and why when you are making a whipped sugar soap scrub. Now, further on in the series, we're going to deal with some other wildly different recipes, so that's very exciting. First and foremost, you need to decide as a maker, as an end user, what it is you want your whipped sugar soap scrub to do. Now, for me, for this recipe, this is the recipe that my sudsers have been buying in just bulk for several years. They like this because it's very exfoliating, it's very gentle, it's very moisturizing, rinses off cleanly, no residue, but again, not a huge bubble. And so that's what works for me, but that may not necessarily work for you. And so first and foremost, you need to determine what it is that you want your whipped sugar soap scrub to do and find a recipe that's going to actually match that. Now, to the recipes that are going to actually match that, while we are doing this one today, in this playlist, we're going to be doing multiple different recipes depending on what I think reasonably any one of you could really want out of a whipped sugar soap scrub. So that's what we will be doing in future videos. But for today, let's just get our feet under us and let's start out with, the original that I gave and troubleshoot it. So let's get to the video and we can do that. Okay, so today we are starting an awesome playlist, and that playlist is a whipped soap base that you can turn into whipped sugar soap scrubs. And we are going to be doing multiple versions of this, multiple recipes, and talking about the pros and cons and the reason, and the chemistry behind all of them. So it's going to be a good time, but we are going to start with the original recipe that I gave you. And so the soap paste that is there on the right is 50% olive oil, 30% coconut oil, 15% mango butter, 5% castor oil. It has a super fat of 5%, and it is using a dual lye solution in equal parts. So 50% solution, or half of the lye solution is a potassium hydroxide solution. The other half is a sodium hydroxide solution. That is the soap paste that we were working with in this particular video series that we also made a whipped sugar soap scrub from. Now, in that soap paste recipe and in all of the subsequent videos that were made with what you can make the soap base into, right? I said in every single one of those videos, you don't have to necessarily use this recipe. I use this recipe for the soap base itself, for the paste, for very specific reasons. And the first reason I use this particular soap paste recipe for this is because it is very versatile. This combination of oils and butters with this super fat and the dual lye solution means that you can turn it into easily a whipped face wash, right? You can turn it into an exfoliating beard wash or shave soap. You can turn it into a whipped sugar soap scrub. You can turn it into a liquid soap, and you are going to be getting a nice, creamy, moisturizing lather, which I also talked about in all of this with these original videos. The big bubble is not going to be here. So if you wanted that, you would need to increase the coconut oil and or put in some surfactants, which is what we will get to in future videos. But for now, the reason why this recipe exists is because my sudsers love it. It's versatile. And again, with that 50% olive, you're getting all the moisturizing benefits. And it's also very, very easy to incorporate into a number of other things that you would make the soap paste into. A coconut is obviously going to be for the bubblers, but those are the only bubblers, that 30%. That's the only real bubblers in that. The mango, it stabilizes a whip. It's also very moisturizing, so it's lending to that. And the castor is going to stabilize the lather and also stabilize the whip. But it's not going to be the biggest bubbler as a result, which I talked about in those. So once you have that soap paste figured out, you are then going to convert it to a, your whipped soap base. And so first and foremost, you dissolve your paste into the stuff that we put in to make it essentially a melt and pour soap is what you're dealing with. And so with the original recipe I gave you, it was 7 ounces of paste, 7 ounces of water, 6 ounces of glycerin, and 2.8 ounces of stearic acid. So that is what was in the crock pot all melted together before I added the soap paste into it. Now, the water is necessary for the dissolving factor of the soap paste. And the glycerin is necessary because that's essentially the solvent. All of the different videos that we did on melt and pour bases from scratch, we talked about the importance of solvents. Glycerin is always in my recipes for that because it stabilizes the base, allows it to be whipped, allows it to be turned into multiple other products. It essentially turns a soap paste into what would be known as a melt and pour soap base by definition, in that it can be manipulated into other things. Whereas cold processed soap, it's hard to do because you have all that crystallization right away from the very beginning of making the soap that makes it very, very tight. That crystalline structure is already built. And what that glycerin is doing is it is stretching out the formation of that crystalline structure into more malleable parts, essentially. So you can whip it. So you can turn it into a liquid soap. So you can remelt it, which we just did, and turned it into that. Now, what I do with my whipped soap bases, and this was one of the problems that I saw within that post that Swift Creek Soaps put up on Saponification Nation, very first thing, I mean, any like novice, I've made, frosting, or I've whipped a meringue, can see just based on that post, she was dealing with temperature issues, as in she whipped it way too warm, and also she overbeat it. So as for the temperature issue, once you have everything melted down and the paste has been dissolved into the solvents that you have used, put it into your KitchenAid, container there, and put that container in the fridge. Get it cold, very cold. It's just like the same concept with cold butter being, made into flaky pastries. You have to have your butter cold in order to work with that. It's the same concept. These are very, very basic baking concepts, really. So just keep that in mind when you're making something like this, or really anything within the soaping world, because it's still just basic chemistry that applies to not only soap making and cosmetics making, but also just to regular standard parts of your life, like baking a cake, frosting a cake, those sorts of things. The second problem is over whipping. And you see that in all of the instructions for all of your bases that you purchase, from a supplier. Don't over whip it. If you over whip something, you're trying to incorporate air. Look at that. It's gorgeous. You're trying to incorporate air into your product. If you over whip it, it will deflate. You can only, because again, it's heat. We have heat and friction going on here. If you go too far with the whipping, you're not going to end up with that beautiful consistency. So do keep that in mind as well. Those are the two most common mistakes that are made when people start making whipped sugar soap scrubs. They will deflate if you over whip, and they will definitely deflate if you are trying to whip them too warm, because again, heat and friction are happening just via the whipping process. So it's okay. Now, in some other videos, we will be talking about ways to fix these things on the fly, should you have over whipped them. And also, if you want to change the consistency of any of these, recipes, or with really any base that you could use, there are easy ways to change the consistency, both in the adjusting of the recipe, but also in the whip itself. If you notice that things are getting too liquidy and you don't like that, for example, you can change it. So this particular recipe that I use, It is first and foremost not anything that I ever pipe. I am not a piped soap maker. That's not how I roll. I'm a scoop into the container kind of gal. But that was another thing that was mentioned within this post on Saponification Nation. I would like it to be pipeable. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to show you how this particular one is pipeable, but also we're going to talk about ways to adjust it if you want a thicker, consistency as well. Okay, and as I said, I am not a piping whipped soap person. I don't do that. I don't much understand the point of it, in all honesty, because you're letting, I don't know, it feels like you are kind of gypping your customers by doing that, because you're further incorporating more air into a container, and so they get less product as a result. It weighs less than if you were to just scoop it in. But also, I'm just really impossibly bad at filling piping bags, and it's messy and I don't like it. And it's one more thing that I have to clean and it causes me stress. But, we're going to show you how it can be whipped. Unfortunately, throughout the course of this entire series, with piping bags and stuff that are not, and tips that are not well suited for piping, because I don't pipe. So I have these really pretty, like I think they're called Russian tips with all these little teeny tiny holes. This is probably not the right thing to use for a whipped sugar soap scrub, because there's sugar in there that also has to go through these little teeny tiny holes. But whatever. I'm showing you, this is not a soupy consistency. This is not a runny consistency. This is definitely a pipeable consistency within all of this. There is no deflating. There is no dissolving of the sugar, which we will talk about later also. But yeah, that's my tip. It gets worse throughout this entire series, I promise. I mean, at some point, I just start using a closed tip with nothing. It's bad. But anyway, there is no problems with this being runny or not pipeable, because I whipped it cold and I didn't over whip it. This recipe was not changed at all. Eventually I took the tip off because I got tired of it. It's still pipeable. Look, that one looks like poo though. I don't pipe things, guys. But look, it is pipeable. That's totally a thing. And so the first step, if you are making this particular paste or any whipped sugar soap from a base, is going to be, or from a paste, is going to be, or a base actually, to that, both, is going to be, don't over whip it and make sure that you're whipping it cold. That's it. That's the whole list. Now, to the amount of sugar that gets put into these things, it is up to 100. Well, it's between 75 and 125% of the total weight of the solution in totality, right? And so for this particular one, I put in 16 ounces of sugar. I like that as a nice consistency, because I know how my end users, how my sudsers tend to use my whipped sugar soap scrubs, and they use it on their face, which is another reason why I use the base that I do, the paste that I do. I want a lot of really moisturizing, gentle cleansing oils in something like this, because too many sudsers have told me I totally use this on my face. And I'm like, well, if that's what you're going to choose to do, and that's the exfoliation that you're going to do, fine. I need to make sure that I'm not delivering them with a too high of a cleansing number, so it's drying them out, because by nature of exfoliation, you're already drying out the skin because abrasion. So that's another reason for the actual base. Okay, and now on to the test. So these are the freshly made whipped sugar soap scrubs. As you can see from the crock pot that is to the left there, no time has passed. It's still the same day. And I'm going to do two tests. One is going to be an immediate test, what it is right now. And we're also going to do a test of a whipped sugar soap scrub that has sat for a very long time, actually. And you can reference how long of a time that was by seeing when I made these videos. The video for the soap and anyway, we'll get there. But as you can see, It is a very beautiful exfoliation, plenty of sugar in all of that. The sugar is not going to be dissolving because of the water. That when you're working with a solution like this, while logic flows that you are going to have dissolving with the sugar because water, and that's what happens with sugar, you are incorporating this into a product that is first and foremost a soap. And so while the water is in there, that is accurate. What the water is doing at this point is already working pretty hard to stabilize the separation of the crystalline structure. And so it's not going to impact your sugar in this formulation for very long. Now, this is a whipped sugar soap scrub that I made on the channel probably 8-9 months ago at this point. And as you can see, still plenty of sugar in all of that. That's how it looks after 8 months of sitting. It's beautiful. And also the lather does get a little better. Isn't that great? But as I said with all of this, for this particular recipe, the reason I use this paste and this formulation is because I want those little tiny, tight little bubbles, because my end user, my customers, use this on their face. And so I want moisture above the big bubbles. In the next video, I think we will be doing a big bubbler, and we can totally talk about ways to fix that recipe so you can have more bubbles. And there it is, the first of multiple whipped sugar soap scrubs with the recipe and all of the things, again, using the original that we went with. And as you can see, the lather, it's meant to be creamy. It's meant to be moisturizing because, as I said in the video, my sudsers use this for their face. And if they're going to keep doing that, I'm going to let them live their best life and make their own exfoliating decisions for sure. But in addition to that, I'm going to make sure that the oils that go into it are moisturizing and are not going to further dry out the skin. Because remember, the act of exfoliation in general is by definition drying. It's because of the abrasion. So just do keep that in mind when you are formulating your recipes. This is one that I love because it's incredibly versatile, can be turned into a number of different products, including a liquid soap. But you might need other things. You might need that great big bubble. And that's what the rest of this playlist is going to be about, for sure, because you can achieve that in a number of different ways. So there's that. So next up in the whipped sugar soap scrub recipe line is going to be a recipe from Soap Shreds, which can yield bigger bubbles, a thicker consistency, and does not include the use of potassium hydroxide. So we will talk about all of that, tomorrow. For detailed instructions and the full recipe list for this particular recipe, while I talk about it and it's all in the video or whatever, for handy form, it's in the Discord. It's in a channel in the Discord. So you guys can totally peruse that. The members can find that for reference and have that available for sure. Thank you to my members for being awesome and existing and being in the Discord and existing and doing all of the soapy things, really. I hope every single one of you found this informative, had some fun. I will see you in the next video where we are going to make a whipped sugar soap scrub from Soap Shreds. So like a rebatch thing. And we're going to talk all about the why and the what and the how and the chemistry. So I will see you then for another round of soapy fun. Bye.